Star Trek Voyager from the outset held fandom's hopes for a wonderfully fresh and vibrant revitalization of a franchise that was getting stale in its episodic delivery. But instead of wowing fans, Voyager's ratings would begin to dwindle and anger large portions of said fanbase. And this episode, Tattoo, would just be one among many to do so. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a web series that focuses on the background information on any given topic in Star Trek. In this episode, we're taking a look at Star Trek Voyager's episode Tattoo to better understand its place in Star Trek history. I remember the first time I watched this episode thinking to myself, geez, all they need to do in this episode was to have Chakotay smudge 2 red lines on his face, whip a feather cap out of his medicine bundle, and dance around hoping for rain. This episode, at least for me, was the very definition of stereotypes. The story was written by Larry Brody, with the teleplay written by Michael Piller. Larry Brody only wrote 2 Star Trek episodes, this one and the animated series episode The Magics of Megas 2. While Michael Piller was an important pillar, no pun intended, to Star Trek as a whole. He was a writer and executive producer for Star Trek The Next Generation and co-creator of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Voyager. As I said before, a large chunk of fandom was disgusted with the episode due to its racist stereotypes included within it, calling all of Voyager's powers that be racists for creating this nonsense. This was a much smaller group at the time, but has grown by leaps and bounds in today's society and social atmosphere. As always, when I choose my topic for Backtrek, I go into full research mode, gathering all the facts and data I can to give you good trinaries the most accurate information I possibly can. I don't sugarcoat or twist the facts to my views, no matter how much a certain fact might go against what I personally believe. But what I found here actually shocked me. You see, Chakotay, or Chocolatay as B'Elanna often calls him, was one of the first fleshed out characters for Star Trek Voyager. And to get the character right, the powers that be enlisted the help of a Native American consultant, well represented in the film community named Jamake Highwater, or Jamake, again if you're B'Elanna. With Voyager's producers not wanting to tie Chakotay down to any particular tribe, Highwater forwarded a 7-page outline which then became the basis of Chakotay's entire backstory. This all sounds well and good, right? But the truth is, Highwater, the Native American consultant, was actually nothing of the sort. Highwater's real name was Jackie Marks, a con man who made his fortune by conning the film industry into believing he was a true Native American, when he was in fact of Eastern European Jewish ancestry. And actual true pillars of the Native communities heavily criticized him for his writings, which typically contained stereotypical and inaccurate depictions of Native cultures. To give you a little context about all this, it would be like you going and hiring a rich white teenager to create the character basics for Uhura, Cisco, and LaForge, simply because that teen listened to a lot of rap music. What you'd end up with would be Uhura with a big gadunk-a-dunk twerking at the comm station, Cisco running down the promenade every time Odo said hello to him, and LaForge responding to all of Captain Picard's inquiries with dynamite. I hope that makes the problem a little more clear for you. So, I don't think the producers of Voyager were racist per se, but they did buy into this con artist's stereotypes hook, line, and sinker. And to be fair, stereotypes are a form of racism, so it can be no surprise that fandom, who tends to truly believe in Jean's high ideals, would look at Chakotay and scream when watching this episode. This episode was actually pitched during the first season of Voyager, but was put on the back burner because no one could figure out how to make it work. Michael Piller was very proud of this episode, stating, "I'd always been attracted to the idea of the pitch, which was that Indians have these myths about sky spirits. A natural extension of the myth was that these could have been travelers from outer space. For Chakotay to find evidence of these sky spirits seemed to be the beginning of a terrific personal journey for him. Robert Beltran was also very proud of this episode. He explained, "That was a huge epic story for me. It was a great personal episode because I related to it on a couple of different levels. For example, in this episode, Chakotay says, 'I don't understand the ancient language of my people.' And my own Spanish is passable, but I'm always revealing that I'm not yet able to participate fully in conversations with my own people. So, a lot of elements of that story resonated very strongly with me." Just a little bit of Trek trivia for all you Chakotay lovers out there. Remember the scene in this episode where Chakotay strips down nude? Well, sorry everyone, that was actually a body double, not Beltran himself. Sorry, Grandma. Even Rick Berman was pleased with how this episode turned out, referring to the finished product as a lovely show. Alexander Singer would direct this outing in the Star Trek universe. Again, another director who was no stranger to Star Trek. He directed 22 episodes of Trek, including TNG's Relics and the Descent two-parter, Deep Space Nine's Adversary and Starship Down, and Voyager's Threshold and Macrocosm. The episode's B-plot concerning the Doctor dealing with the Levodian flu was actually suggested by the Doctor himself, Robert Picardo. He says, "That was the first story idea that I ever suggested that was actually used by the writers. Not having any interest in writing it myself, I was suggesting it just because I thought it might be a funny thing for me to act out." Picardo would go on to suggest how the Doctor would react to Ensign Wildman at the beginning of the episode, having no sympathy whatsoever for her pregnancy. All of Picardo's scenes were actually filmed in only one day. Voyager's production team was very nervous about this episode, thinking they could never find a way to do it with Voyager's weekly budget. However, when push came to shove, they were able to make it happen and did a pretty solid job with it. Apparently, not everyone involved with the project was easy to work with, however. Remember that scene with the Hawk swooping down to attack Neelix? Well, apparently that well-trained Hawk was brought on set, preparations were made, the director yelled action, and instead of swooping at Neelix, took off after a crow, heading in the very opposite direction. It took 3 hours to find him, and the delay put a huge strain on this episode's production. In the flashback scenes, young Chakotay is played by Douglas Spain, being his first venture into episodic television. He would go on to be in numerous TV shows, including Nash Bridges, Becker, and CSI Miami. Henry Darrow would return to Star Trek to play Chakotay's father. You might remember him from last week's Back Trek episode on Conspiracy, where he played the Vulcan Admiral at Starfleet Command. Before we head into the trailer for Tattoo and I end this episode of Backtrack, I want to head back to the racism topic. As I said, when I watched this episode originally, I certainly saw the stereotypes, but I didn't think it was racist. Perhaps I was young and naive, and since most television of the time portrayed these stereotypes, it all seemed natural to me, and therein lies the problem. When we have any television show or movies saying that this is how a certain type of person is, whether they are black, Asian, homosexual, Native American, or any other culture, race, or sexuality on this diverse planet of ours, it is a problem. I grew up and was able to realize the problem this episode presented and why it would anger some of fandom so much, but that doesn't mean everyone has that reaction. Current world events have shone a huge spotlight on this problem, and it's our job to keep striving to better ourselves and make a world worthy of our children and our children's children. I'm not a huge fan of all of Gene's ideals. I do believe in this one, however. And I do believe that we are all equal and should be allowed to be the complex and non-stereotypical people we all are. This episode comes from a different time, and I don't believe for a minute that it was Star Trek producers' intent to make a racist episode, and that's important. With everything going on, some of us tend to forget that the intent behind something is also very important to consider, and that can't be more true than with this episode. Tattoo is an exploration of a Native American stereotype, but instead of condemning it for what it seems to be, use it as a conversation piece to explain to children and grandchildren why it's not right and why stereotypes are bad. And explain the events surrounding this episode so they can understand and appreciate the intent behind it, rather than buying into the stereotypes and dwelling within them. Understanding is the key to IDIC, infinite diversity in infinite combinations, one of the fundamentals of Star Trek. And you can't begin to change the world or a single person's view without conversation.
A vision from Chakotay's past.
If you have no spirits to guide you, I fear you will lose your way.
Brings him face to face with an ancient power.
It's a cyclone.
Beyond myth.
My people called you the Sky Spirits.
Beyond magic.
It almost looks like a hawk.
Beyond mysticism.
You have nothing to fear from me.
Lies unimaginable terror.
Hey! Wait!
On the next Star Trek Voyager.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrek. What do you think of Voyager's episode Tattoo? Do you understand why some fans think of it as racist? Do you agree or disagree with them? Well, leave your comments in the section below, respectfully. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Want to help the channel connect to all of fandom? Then consider becoming a channel patron. The link to our Patreon account is in the description below. Thanks again for watching. Live long and prosper.